Hello, folks. You're listening to episode 19 of your favorite sports betting podcast, A Mug's Game. And here is your host, Smeg. How are yous all doing out there, everybody? It's been a long time. I think the last time we had a podcast was for the French Open, which was another pretty successful podcast from the tennis betting point of view. But yeah, we've taken a few months off. We're back on lockdown here in Ireland, which is where I am at the moment, in Dublin, Ireland. And, well, I can't think of any better cure for lockdown depression than bringing back the Happy Slam, the Australian Open. Probably out of all the slams, I've been to the French Open, Australian Open, and Wimbledon. The only one I haven't been to is the US Open. But out of my all the slams, the Australian Open is my favourite because the atmosphere is so different. It is like the Happy Slam. Like the crowds are just more into it, I guess. Like, it's just more of an atmosphere, more of a party atmosphere in Australia. So, and thankfully, there's going to be some crowds at the Australian Open this year as well. So, look, we're going to go into a review of the matches themselves, or not the matches, the draws, the men's draw and the women's draw. Just unbelievably excited about this because, you know, it's very, very fascinating stuff. Like, there were times, you know, say, for example, there have been times in the past where, like, say, for example, like the French Open in Wimbledon, like, not just the past, like, it's basically the present, where it's just, you know, you're not quite as intrigued about what's going to happen because you know that it's going to be Nadal, or even in the Australian Open for many years, like, you kind of think that it's probably going to be Djokovic and probably going to be a Djokovic and Nadal final. Like, just that's the way it's been the last few years. But I think it's very different from the men's side this year. We'll be talking about that draw in a moment. Forgive me if I am going to have little bits of pauses, or if I won't be having the smoothest transitions between bets. I've got a whole notebook here full of pages, and it's just kind of loads of just random scribbles of numbers and words. Like, I think if John Nash, if you showed this book to John Nash, like, it would give him a headache. I'd say, like, he's enough problems on his plate as well at this stage. So, like, yeah, it's just so there'll be times where I'll be even reading my own notes here, and I won't be able to figure out what I'm trying to say. So just have patience. I'm very happy with the bets that we have, and we're just going to crack into it. We're going to go into the quarter bets. I'm not going to go into outright. I might have a little talk about absolute outright bets at the very end, but if for now we'll just go the men's draw quarter bets, the women's draw quarter bets, and we'll move on from there. And also, there's a few. I have a question for some of the listeners of the podcast. If you want to get involved, you want to put it's not just about tennis betting. We'll be talking about the tennis in general as well. So if you're a tennis fan or a betting fan, if you want to make a comment on this on the comment section on the YouTube, I'd be grateful. I'd be happy to reply to you, and you can have conversations with each other if you want. Also, I have a question, a pretty important question, which I'm very curious to see what people have to say about it. But we'll have to wait till later on in the podcast to get it. To hear what the question is. So, moving on, okay, we're going to talk first of all about the draws here, okay? So, the men's draw, and I'm going to go quarter by quarter. Novak is the top seed in the first quarter, so let's have a look at his potential run. And in fairness to Novak, he doesn't have the easiest run at all, okay? He's got Jeremy Chardy in the first round, probably Francis Tiafoe, a former quarter finalist. Taylor Fritz, who's someone, the young American who's capable of redlining. Possibly Stan Wawrinka, who he has had problems with in the past, or maybe Milos Raonic, who basically has dominated. And then, of course, Alexander Zverev is the most likely candidate for the fourth round in that quarter. Now, that's okay. First of all, of course, these are all players that you would expect Novak to beat. Okay, Chardy, Tiafoe, Fritz. Okay. But what I would worry about from this point of view is Chardy's in good form. He's just off the back of a semi-final run in the warm-up tournament there this week, and lost to Evans yesterday. But these are guys that what Novak ideally wants, especially at his age, are players that he can just kind of beat in his sleep. You know, that he can beat in second gear, and he's going to need to be out. So he can conserve energy for later on in the tournament. And he's going to need more than his second gear or even his third gear to beat he will beat Chardy, he will beat Tiafoe, and he will beat Fritz. But I just have a feeling that these guys could take a little bit more mileage, or take a little bit, sap a bit more energy out of Novak than he would like before he gets on to the latter stages of the tournament. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to beat these guys comfortably, so he doesn't actually clock up too much mileage for later when he needs to be completely fresh. Now, obviously, he's got a potential fourth round against Stan Wawrinka. And if Stan, I have a feeling Stan could come in here in decent form and could make it as far as the fourth round. And Stan has obviously given him problems in the past at Grand Slams. I think he's beaten him 4 times at Grand Slams, so which is quite a feat. And then Zverev. So to look at the price there, Novak is 1-2 to win that quarter, and I don't see any value in that myself. Like I said, he could beat Shardy. He should beat Shardy, Tiafoe. Fritz has a very slim outside chance against him if Fritz red lines, which he's capable of doing. Stan could definitely give him trouble. And the other thing about it is, if it is Stan, and the other thing about it is then Zverev. They've had some very, very close matches. Very, very close matches. Zverev is very, very determined. And if you play Zverev in the quarterfinal, like even they just played in the ATP Cup and Novak won 7-5 in the third set, and actually looked kind of tired before serving it out. So over 5 sets, the younger man. There has been a lot of talk. I know Gil Gross has referred to this as that Novak doesn't seem to have the same cardio and the same will to actually to go through the pain barrier required to win these long, grueling 5-set matches. So that remains to be seen if that plays out in this tournament as well. So I can't see any value in the 1-2. Of course, then what I am going to look at from a betting point of view in this quarter is actually I'm going to talk about Alexander Zverev, and I think in the past Zverev has broke onto the scene as a teenager, but for years and years he was having trouble. He was getting knocked out early in Grand Slams, to the likes of I think Koric early, and then to the likes of Gulbis at Wimbledon, and there was many more. He really did struggle to I suppose master the 5-set format, because it is a quite daunting format, and that's what the big three have been so brilliant at, been able to just master their early rounds, master the format, and reserve energy for when they really need it. And I think Zverev has finally shown that he's kind of able to do that, and he's got a pretty decent draw in all fairness. He's determined. He finished off the year very strong last year. He got to the US Open final. He kind of broke that duck. He got to the Australian Open semi-final, broke that duck last year, and showed a lot of bottle to come back and beat the likes of Karen Bustan, and beat the likes of Borna Koric. Although he should never have been in that situation in the first place. And really, he should really have beaten. He kind of let Team back into the final, and he probably regret that. Then he had a run to the fourth round and got beaten by Sinner. He said he wasn't feeling well that day in the French Open, but it was just a sign that he was backing it up to some extent. And there's no shame in losing to Sinner on clay anyway. And of course, he got to the semi-final of the Australian Open last year and beat Stan Wawrinka in the quarterfinal, if I remember right, and had a decent match against Team in the semi-final. So he has kind of finally shown that he's become reliable at the slams. And just because he finished the year last year, he didn't look at his very, very best in the ATP Cup, but he's serving pretty good. He looks pretty good. Had a close loss to Djokovic, a close loss to Medvedev. He's performing at pretty much an elite level, and his draw is so easy. So he's got Giron in the first round. Pretty good American player, but it's just the talent edge. Zverev has such a big talent edge there. He should take care of him pretty easily. Maybe Taro Daniel or Cressy second round, another potentially very easy match. Then we got veteran Manarino or Kecmanovic. Kecmanovic has a bit of a reputation. I remember last year I tipped up Seppi to beat Kecmanovic at 2-1, and he won, and he delivered it in straight sets. Kecmanovic is a decent player. Manarino is a tricky player, but they're both players that Zverev should have no problem dealing with. And then finally, the potential fourth round matches, the worst case scenario is maybe Dusan Lajovic or Gael Monfils. Now, Gael Monfils, I don't think is likely to get there. He's had massive injury problems. He's getting a bit old. He's getting on in age in any case, and he didn't look too good at the ATP Cup this year. And Lajovic is a clay courter really. He's probably a bit of an underrated an underrated hard courter as well. But look, I'm not saying that either of these two players are going to get there anyway, but these are the best possible opponents that he can face. And it's just, you just have to think Zverev, he's matured a lot. I know he's had a lot of stuff going on in the background, and it's amazing to me that he's able to block that out. You know, all that stuff that's, you know, about the domestic abuse and all that kind of stuff that he got accused of. It's amazing he's able to block it out. I know he's not necessarily the most popular guy, but look, I just think that he's at a stage in his career now where he's able, you know, he's ready to take care of this type of opposition, and he wants to get to the business end of Grand Slams. Won't always be easy with Zverev. All right, he's a bit like, you know, it's a bit of a roller coaster sometimes. Like, you know, it can be a bit like watching the Mighty Ducks. You know, like kind of think you're thinking to yourself, "Geez, they've got themselves in some hole here. There's no way they can do it. There's no way." And then it's like quack, 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 and Zverev is back, and he's in the quarterfinal of the Grand Slam. So I just think at evens at even money for Zverev to reach the quarterfinals of the Australian Open, and he'd probably be facing a Novak there. I would recommend a 3-point bet on Alexander Zverev to reach the quarterfinal of the Australian Open. Got to factor in that he has matured, he has the talent, and he's got a very handy draw. And he's 4-1. He's not actually 9-2 to win the quarter. I don't even mind that bet, but at the moment, he will likely face Novak in the quarterfinals. So this is the bet I'm going to go for. Now let's have a look at quarter two. Quarter two, of course, is Dominic Thiem's quarter. So there's some other big names in here. Denis Shapovalov versus Yannick Sinner in the first round. Now that is the definition of a popcorn match. What a first round match. It's a pity that they both have to play each other. But yeah, that's a brilliant one. We've got FAA, Felix Auger Aliassime. I don't know if I probably butchered that pronunciation. I never get it right anyway. And then little Diego Schwartzman. There's people like Karina Busta, Dimitrov. All these guys are in there. Kyrgios is in there. So look, this is a, you know, there's lots of good players in here, but once again, I'm going to go through my bet, and my bet is actually for Dominic. Dominic Thiem is 6-5, okay, to win the quarter, to get to the semi-final. But my bet is actually just for him to get to the quarter-final, which is 5-6. And if you look at his potential route, I think the thing about Dominic Thiem as well, he's also proven at this stage that he is reliable. I think what we've seen in men's tennis is that we've seen a much more pronounced hierarchy. It used to be kind of like the big three, maybe the big four, and then after that, it could have been anybody. It could have been a Song, it could have been a Silic, it could have been a Ferrer. You know, after, you know what I mean. But with this, I think we're seeing a much more pronounced hierarchy where you have Novak, you've got Nadal, and then Thiem. Maybe you could argue that maybe Thiem is in some ways, maybe at this current moment, could be, some people can argue that he's better than those guys at the moment. Some people argue he's the best player in the world. But you say Thiem, you've got Medvedev, and then you've got Zverev, Tsitsipas, and basically those kind of six are quite a bit, and then Rublev, and those guys they're basically, and then the eighth person could be, there's a lot of different candidates you could have for the 8th best player in the world, but I think the hierarchy is fairly well pronounced, and Thiem has proven himself in the last few slams that he's not going to get beaten in early rounds. You know, he got to the Australian Open, like he's, you know, in 2019 French Open final, in Australian Open final in 2020. French Open quarter final, and then just kind of ran out of steam a little bit. Probably was exhausted from his US Open efforts as well, and against Diego Schwartzman. No shame in losing to Diego Schwartzman on clay anyway. And then won the US Open. Okay, so like he's and in his interviews, I know he got beaten pretty badly. I think it was in the ATP Cup by, I think, Berrettini, but I wouldn't read anything into that as well. Krajinovic hammered him in the warm-up event. I think it was at Cincinnati before US Open. He still won the US Open, so I wouldn't read anything into that. I just think he's very anxious to build on his you know, he's a very ambitious player, very anxious to win more slams. And look at his draw. He's got Kukushkin. It was a tricky enough first round match, but generally speaking, not in Thiem's league. Maybe Hugo Deli in the second round. Not exactly a tough matchup either. It could be, and then it possibly Nick Kyrgios or Hugo Humbert in the third round. Maybe that could be his toughest match so far. But at the end of the day, Kyrgios, look, Thiem is just on a different level from Kyrgios, from a fitness point of view, from a mentality point of view. Kyrgios lost quite easily to Coric, and I think he's got some kind of an injury that he's worried about. So yeah, he's got an injury that he's concerned about. That could really affect him. Hugo Humbert, I think it's maybe a little bit. He's kind of a French player, hits the ball very flat, a lefty. Very enjoyable to watch, but he's not in Thiem's league. He's not ready to beat Thiem over the best of 5. And then, of course, in the last possible round, it's maybe Dimitrov, maybe Silic, probably not. Carina Busta is maybe the most likely opponent there. Carina Busta, a very solid Grand Slam performer, but generally speaking, when he comes up against the top guys, he always falls short. And he's got nothing. He's just, he's got nothing in his game. Really, he's one dimensional. He's just got great cardio, and he's a very, he's a tough cookie. But he's got nothing in his game to really hurt Thiem with. And for Thiem, with his mentality, doesn't seem to be any chance that he'll slip up. For him to get through those group of players at 5-6, I think that's a wonderful price, and I'm going to put 3.6 points on Dominic Thiem to get to the quarterfinal to at 5-6 with Paddy Power. By the way, that evens is with Sky Bet. It's with Paddy Power. It's with Bet365. To get to and this is with Sky Bet as well. To get to the quarterfinal at 5-6, Sky Bet, Bet365, Dominic Thiem. And the reason I don't have him, because he could potentially play a Shapovalov, Yannick Sinner, maybe a Schwartzman in the quarterfinal. And while you'd still fancy him in that matches, those guys are actually a step up from the competition that he will be facing before that. So I just decided, he's 6-5 to win the quarter. I don't think that's a big enough step up in price for it to be worth backing him to win the quarter. But to get to the quarterfinal, definitely 5-6 is value. Okay, so looking at quarter 3, this is the quarter with Medvedev and Rublev in it. And if you look at this quarter here, you've got, I'm going to go through first of all, okay, Medvedev, he obviously won the ATP Tour Finals last year, or in a couple of months ago, and he's look at this now. He got beaten in the quarterfinal. He got to the US Open semi-final. Got beaten in the first round of the French Open by Fuchsovich, but he's never done well in the French Open. Don't think he's ever won a match there. And he got beaten in the 4th round, I think, last year to Stan Wawrinka. Stan kind of redlined that match. But I just think Medvedev is in a better place now. And looking at his draw, he's got Pospisil in the first round. That's a tricky first round. Pospisil had a great run in the US Open. I think he bet Batista Gut and Raonic in his run to in the US Open last year. But Pospisil is one of those guys who has had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Hard to know what sort of shape he'll be in, but he shouldn't be in Medvedev's league anyway. Then Carbuelas Buena in the second round should be an easy match. Clay Courter, Krajinovic. Krajinovic is a handy player, but generally never really does the business against the big guns. And then possibly in the fourth round, it could be Coric or Goffin. Once again, guys that I think Medvedev is way better than. And then finally, Rublev would be his opponent, potential opponent in the final round. Would be his potential opponent in the last match, he is evens to win the quarter. He's 8-13 to get to the quarterfinal. I would say I don't hate the evens, but I just would be a little bit worried about Rublev, even though you think he's a 3-0 head-to-head against Rublev. It seems to be a good matchup for Rublev. Rublev loves to hit the ball with pace, and Medvedev Rublev's a pretty one-dimensional player, not very good at the net. He loves to hit the ball with pace, can change the direction, but Medvedev loves to feed it, loves to absorb pace, so it's not a great matchup for him. But I think the best bet there now is for Rublev to reach the quarterfinals at 6-5. Okay, so my bet is Rublev to reach the quarterfinals at 6-5, and here is his run. Hanfmann, who is not a particularly strong player on hard court, more of a clay courter. Montero, who's on a bit of a run, a bit of an underrated player on on hard courts, but kind of more renowned as a Brazilian clay courter. But he's still not in Rublev's league. Then possibly Querrey or Sonogo in the third round. I don't think I'd be fearing any of those players. Sonogo's it's a tough player, but he's fairly one-dimensional as well. And just everything that he does well, Rublev does a bit better. And then finally, maybe Struff or Batista Gut in the fourth round. Now, Struff Struff had played some good stuff at the ATP Cup this week. And we know that Batista Gut has a pretty big reputation, but the thing about Batista Gut, I think he's a player that's on the wane a little bit. He's he's had some bad losses in recent times. Like Cilic bet him in the Australian Open last year. I think it was Pospisil bet him in the US Open, and he just he didn't he hasn't looked that impressive at the ATP Cup either. So. Look, I just think Rublev is a man of the mission. He's a very ambitious player. He's so mentally tuned in, so zoned in. It's like again, like in the past, when I talk about this hierarchy stuff, in the past, you couldn't rely on these guys, Rublev. You couldn't really rely on Zverev or Tsitsipas to push forward and get to the latter stages of the tournament when they should be expected to. But now I think you can. I really do think you can. And I think that's a very winnable draw. He's won the last two games against Batista Gut. Struff is a tough player, but hasn't really produced it in the Grand Slams against the really big players. And I think Rublev, once again, would be too solid off the ground against someone like Struff. So I don't think there's any players for us to really worry about there. So I have to tip up Rublev. I'm going to go 2.5 points on Rublev to win quarter three at 6-5. Now I have to say now Bet365 did have a price 11-4, which 11-4 on Rublev and Medvedev to meet in the quarterfinals. It's now 2-1. I worked out the price and it was looking a little bit more like 9-4, so I don't even think 2-1 is good value anymore. But 11-4 certainly was good value. I do think those two guys are going to play each other in the quarterfinals. Medvedev will probably win, I would say, but I give Rublev maybe a little bit more of a chance this time round than I did when they played in the US Open semi-final. Now the final round quarter is the one with Rafa, King Rafa, and of course Stefanos Tsitsipas. And the look at the draws here. I'm going to say Jura, Troitsky, Evans, Deminar, Tsitsipas. Is Nadal's run. So he's got maybe Jera, maybe Viktor Troitsky, Dan Evans. These are guys that he would gobble up in his sleep. Then Deminar, which he has owned historically, and then probably Tsitsipas would be his likely opponent in the quarterfinals. So I would say that's a pretty good draw. It's a much nicer draw to me, even though Evans is in good form. It's a much nicer draw to me than Novak's, because Nadal should be able to beat his first two round opponents in his sleep, while Novak would probably get worked a bit more by his first two round opponents. But then Deminar, you've got to think Deminar is going to be able to push Nadal more than he has done in the past as these years go by. But look, it's just hard to see. It's hard to see him being able to beat Nadal. Tsitsipas is the main goal. Now Nadal is evens to win that. I don't think I can bring myself to back it because he hasn't played any tennis so far this year. I know it's probably just precautionary, but what he did, he played an exhibition match against Team, but he didn't play in the ATP Cup. One bet that you could really think of doing, really, I think, because at a price is for the back Novak and Nadal in a double. We've done this in the past where we've backed them in a double to win their quarters at 4-5, but this time they're at 4-5 just to, Novak is at 2-9 and Nadal is at 8-15 just to get to the final. Because I would fear Tsitsipas a little bit if Nadal was playing him. I don't think that's a gimme at all in the quarterfinals, even though I know Nadal likes to play against one-handed backhands and it's not a bad matchup for Tsitsipas, or for Nadal. I think it's just that he's just more likely to own everybody else in the first four rounds, and Novak, as tough as his opponents are, he should be too good. And even worst case scenario, even if you play Stan, I think Stan is still not the same Stan he was and if it's Raonic, he's always owned Raonic. So I think when you put those two together, I think I would fear Zverev a little bit if I was Novak in the quarterfinals. I would fear Tsitsipas a little bit if I was Nadal. So I wouldn't be tipping up either both players to win their quarters, especially at the prices that they are. But I think for both players to get to the quarterfinals, 4-5, if they're both fresh and healthy, it's very hard to see who's going to beat them. So I think 2.5 points. I'm not going to go too big, but 2.5 points on Nadal and Djokovic to win their quarters. Regarding Tsitsipas, I did have a look at Tsitsipas at 6-4. He plays Gilles Simon. Maybe it's hard to know. Maybe Sun Woo, Hurkacz, who the Polish guy. That's a tough third round matchup. Maybe Berrettini are catching off. Both playing well at the moment, and then Rafa. While I do have faith in Tsitsipas now to go deep, he just has he doesn't have the easiest draw, and I initially wanted to back to 64, and I then realised, do you know what, I'm not crazy about that 6-4 after all. So far I do think Djokovic will win quarter one, but the bet is Zverev to get to the quarterfinals at evens. I do think Thiem will win quarter two, but the bet is and I think he'll probably play in that quarterfinal. It'll probably be either. I think Yannick Sinner could be the guy to get there, but I don't know actually. It's because it's hard to pick Sinner because he has to play Shapovalov in the first round. It's very hard to know who he'll be playing there. Like, don't count out Schwartzman or Felix, but either way, I think he'll win the quarter. But the bet is for him to get to the quarterfinals at 5-6. I think Medvedev will beat Rublev in the quarterfinals, but the bet is for Rublev to get to the quarterfinals at 6-5. And I think probably Nadal will just about edge it against Tsitsipas in the quarterfinals, and that's 3-1. I don't hate that price for them both to play each other in the quarterfinals, but the bet really there is just to add Nadal to Djokovic for both of them to get to in a double for both of them to get to the quarterfinals, and that's 4-5. Okay, so let's move on to the women's betting here. Let me see if we can go through it. Women's betting. Now this is what I was talking about when I'm looking at my thing. Okay, so this is when we'll go back to the men's match betting and stuff, and we'll talk about who we think will win it in the end. But we're going to look at the quarters now. And the quarter one, we're going to talk about quarter one. As a lot of the tennis fans will already know, that the top half of the quarter seems to be a lot more tricky, or a lot easier. Or the bottom half of the draw seems to be a lot more big name heavy than the top half. But we'll have a look at through each quarter by quarter. So quarter one. Let's have a look at this. This is Ash Barty's quarter. Now, Ash Barty is 2-1 to win the quarter, and this was what her run would look like. She's got Kovinic. She's got possibly Gavrilova in the next round. Alexandrova in the third round. Then it's maybe Martic, Kontovic, or I would say maybe Shelby Rogers in the fourth round, and then the final round would be like the likes of Pliskova, Mertens. Maybe Mertens is the most likely candidate, but then you've got likes of Collins and Ostapenko who are definitely potential threats there too. Okay, so going through that, I kind of look at the price. She's 6-5 to get to the quarter final, and I like this price. Now she has played in the warm up event. She got actually Serena gave her a bye into the final. She's going to be playing against Muguruza, who's in unbelievable form at the moment, in the final. In the final, but she did have some good wins. She had a good win against Shelby Rogers there in the quarterfinal, and she did win against Bogdan. Now she did need 3 sets against some of those players, but I just think that she probably just needed some game time. She does look fit. She did get 10 or 11 aces against Rogers in that quarterfinal in 2 sets, which is good going. She's serving well. Doesn't look to be at her very, very best, but I think that she'll be able to play herself into this tournament, and I just don't see where the massive threat is coming from. Kovinic, just as she should have too much craft and guile for Kovinic. Gavrilova is back. Gavrilova, it's good to see her back. Saw her a bit of her against Serena. Didn't play too bad, but Serena still give her a bit of a beating. Matt Barty should once again have too much class, better serve, and just more firepower from the back of the court than Gavrilova, and more variety, of course. Alexandrova can be a dangerous enough player, but I do think that Barty would be a good enough matchup for she'd play. Alexandrova wouldn't like to play all those backhands against all those backhand slices, and look, Alexandrova is a bit too flaky. I wouldn't have any faith in her beating Barty. And then Martic or Kontovic. Like Martic, ultimately plays her best tennis on clay. Kontovic, if Kontovic got into a fourth round, Kontovic is a good player, but generally speaking, she does get beaten by the top players in the slams. When it comes to the business end of the tournament, generally speaking, especially in front of an Australian crowd, I don't see Kontovic being able to hold her nerve against someone like Barty in that situation. And so those are the players. And then obviously we'll talk about Rogers in a second. Those are the players that she'd have to get through. And I think that Barty, I think she's playing well enough. I think she's mature enough, and with the Australian crowd behind her, I really do think she's going to be in the quarterfinal. And at 6-5, that's the bet that I want to make instead of the 2-1 bet, because she's likely to be against a form opponent, a good player in the quarterfinal, and I would say you got to say that those players that she plays, I do think Barty has the edge over them all. Like Martic wouldn't be someone I'd be scared of at all. Bencic is in terrible form at the moment, so not someone to be scared of. Kontovic and Alexandrova, yeah, she's surely going to beat those players. So now the one player I would be a little bit afraid of there is Shelby Rogers. Now Shelby Rogers, they went to Shelby Rogers. Now look, is with Paddy Powers. If you want to do a saver, so I'm going to, before I start, even this is what I'm talking about with sloppy thinking. Before I start, I'm going to tip up 3 points on Barty at 6-5 to win to get to the quarterfinals, not to win the quarter, to get to the quarterfinals at 6-5 with Sky Bet, and it's with Bet365 as well. Now, there's a catch to that. There's savers such as or there's a saver which is a value bet, which is on Shelby Rogers. Now Shelby Rogers could be the one that she actually ends up playing in the quarterfinals, or in the fourth round, and that could be the one, that the most dangerous opponent. Even though she has beaten her twice, and she needed a Champions tiebreak to beat her there in Melbourne this week in the warm-up event. But Rogers got to the quarterfinals of the US Open last year. All right, in 2020, only a few months ago. She beat the likes of Kvitova and Rybakina to get there. And she's been to the quarterfinals of the French Open. She's a big time player, and I saw her this week. I was very impressed with her. She beat the likes of Peterson and beat the likes of Martic in straight sets. Oh, not Peterson wasn't in straight sets, but she had some good wins there. She's looking in incredible shape, and her draw isn't too bad. She's got a reasonably easy first round draw. Well, this Jones girl is actually a great story. She plays for, I think Francesca Jones is her name, from Britain, and she did get through qualifying quite well. But Rogers should have too much for her. Martic, she's already beaten her in straight sets this week. She's just got the edge over someone like Martic in a fast hard court. Then possibly the Kontovic in the third round. Worst case scenario, I think that's just a kind of a bit of a flip of the coin. Maybe I'd even I don't know. I can't quite make Rogers' favourite there, but she wouldn't be a big underdog against Kontovic. And then it would be Barty in the quarterfinals, or in the fourth round. And then once she beats Barty, it would be Mertens, Pliskova, could be an Ostapenko or a Collins if they go on a bit of a run. Right, could be any of those players. But once she, so she's 50-1. I did the maths there, going through it. With the worst case scenarios would be Jones, Martic, Konta, Barty, probably Pliskova. That's the worst case scenarios, and my maths brought that price up to about 28-1. She's 50-1 with Paddy Power to win that quarter, and it's a great saver to have, especially if you have Barty to get to the fourth round. And I have to say, you have to put a half point on Shelby Rogers at 50-1 to win quarter one in the women's tennis. Of course, Pliskova, it's very hard to pick some of the other players. Michkova's in that quarter as well. Ostapenko and Michkova play each other in the first round. Ostapenko is an underdog about there, so we'll talk about that later on. Pliskova doesn't have a great draw. She's around 6-1, but she's got Collins in the second round, who beat her in straight sets there this week. She'll have to get through Mertens as well, and then she'll have to get through Barty probably. So look, Mertens, I think, maybe is usually so solid. She's the most likely to get through to the quarter final. But I would never really trust Mertens. That's not that I 100% trust Mertens, but I just feel that any player that kind of finds her game, that redlines a bit, has to beat the Mertens. Mertens has her ceiling. She's an excellent player. but she's not elite in my view. Okay, so so let me see now. So the next quarter is Sophia Cannon. Sophia Cannon, she's a Australian Open champion, and she's at 9. She get her at 4-1 or 9-2 with Sky Bet to win her quarter, and she has Inglis in the first round, which she should easily take care of. She's got Kanepi probably in the second round, or maybe Sevastova, which is a tricky enough second round. Kanepi's in great form. She's great form. She had a win over Sabalenka this week. She had a win over Alexandrova, and she's playing well. But at the same time, we'll go through it, and then maybe Vekic or Podoroska. Podoroska played some good tennis, beat Kvitova this week as well. Then Vondrousova beat her. Vekic not in particularly good form either, but still seeded. Then Jennifer Brady in the fourth round, and then possibly we're looking at maybe Sakari, Svitolina, or Azarenka in the last round. Now at 4-1, I initially was loving it. And then I just thought to myself, the reason I like it is because I do trust Cannon. You know, I trust in. I feel like Cannon feels like she belongs at the top. Cannon is going into this Grand Slam with the intention of winning it. She's a great match player. She's kind of like it reminds me of. She's like a much steadier version of Ostapenko. Very explosive ground strokes, particularly on her backhand side. But she doesn't have the serving issues. She's just a little bit more mentally stable than Ostapenko. Maybe a little less explosive, but more mentally stable, and doesn't have the serving issues that she has. But she's a really, she's a tough cookie mentally. Got to the French Open final when nobody was expecting it. In fact, we tipped her up at 22-1 to win her quarter in the French Open, which worked out really well for us in the last podcast, if you want to check it out. But look, it's not the easiest. Kanepi can redline sometimes and make it difficult for you, and she is in good form. Vekic and Podoroska is... she got to the French Open semi-final. She's a tricky player, potentially, but she should be able to take care of Podoroska. It's just more to be worried about Jennifer Brady, who had a great run to the US Open semi-final last year, is playing well this week, and has had some good wins. Brady walls through to the quarterfinals last year at the US Open, and was very unlucky not to beat Osaka, the eventual champion. There was a very tough match in the semi-final. And then, of course, Svitolina is always a potential. I think I'd fancy Canada against Svitolina, but that could be a close match. And then Azarenka could find her form. Sakari's dangerous. So there's a lot of dangerous players there that I just can't bring myself to back the 9-2, even though I was tempted by it for Cannon, because I do believe Cannon is going to be fighting for it. But Brady's a big danger, and in fact, I backed Brady at 75-1 outright, and I'm actually happy with that outright now. I haven't had as many outrights as I've had in the past, but because it's hard to find value prices outright, but I'm happy I got Brady at 75-1. So look at that price, those prices. If you look at Svitolina's draw, she doesn't have a great draw either. She can get her at 8-1 to win the quarter, but she's got the likes of Buzkova, very tricky first round match, and then Coco Gauff in the second round. Not exactly a second round match that you want to get involved with. Coco Gauff, of course, beat Osaka in the quarterfinal, or Osaka at the Australian Open last year. Maybe Sloane Stephens if she finally finds something. Maybe Putintseva. But then, of course, she'd have to beat the likes of an Azarenka or a Sakari, and then Cannon. It's just her Brady. So it's a lot to ask for her. Azarenka, the same thing, doesn't have an easy first round. Pagula, and then a potential third round with Sakari. So it's very hard to be back in, because ideally you want to be backing players that have a few easy first rounds. An easy first round where you're confident that they're going to be in the fourth round or the quarterfinal, where if you have an opportunity to cover, if you kind of having watched the tournament for a little while, you might think, okay, maybe this bet is in danger. You'll have an opportunity to cover profitably. But when players are playing tough players in the first few rounds, I think they're less value to be backing in the early stage, to win the quarter. So that's the idea behind that. Now let's have a look at the third quarter. Now this is a very, very tricky quarter, in my opinion. The other thing I'll say about Cannon is that I do think that I haven't seen this market, but if this market does go up, I will be tipping up 2.75 points if there is a like certain markets I'm going to talk about, if there is a market where it says Cannon to reach the fourth round and it's 8-11, I would definitely be back in that. I know Kanepi's dangerous, but in general speaking, she should be able to beat her. If you see that market, if that market comes up, Cannon to reach that fourth round, yes, please, thank you very much. I'll take that at 4-5, 8-11, even 4-6. I'll take it. Because I do have faith in her in that she's not someone that will allow herself to slip up. Third quarter, big names in this third quarter. Obviously, you've got Muguruza, you've got Naomi Osaka, and you've got Andreescu. Andreescu we have not seen in a long time. Basically a year since she's won the US Open. She's obviously had her injury problems. I know I've got friends who have different more conspiratorial takes that she's serving a silent doping ban, and he was even sending me a picture there today, and like her face looks very wide or whatever. It's very hard to know what to expect from her, but we know that she's got Grand Slam winning potential, Grand Slam winning talent. You know, that maybe she has the potential to be the best player in the world if she can manage to stay fit, even better than the likes of an Osaka. But there's a lot of question marks over her now, so she's one to kind of wait and see. But she's definitely, because she's a danger, it makes it a little bit harder to consider back at the other players. I forgot to mention as well that Kvitova is in here too, and Vondrousova. So, but we look at Osaka's run, the US Open champion, and she's got a pretty tricky run. She's got Pavlyuchenkova in the first round. That's not a nice first round match. And Pavlyuchenkova historically has loved playing at the at the Australian Open. I think she got to the semi-final a few years back. Was it 2017? Oh no, that was a quarterfinal, and where she beats Svitolina and then Venus better in the quarterfinal. But then she's got maybe Caroline Garcia, who can be a bit of a giant killer at times, as Kontaveit will have learned, and Pliskova will have learned from the last few Grand Slams she played. And then the very tricky Ons Jabeur in the third round, not a nice run at all. And then Gabriel Muguruza in the fourth round, which is like Gabriel Muguruza is absolutely smoking hot. Worst case scenario is Andreescu finds some form as she plays her in the quarterfinal, and then he could easily be Petra Kvitova. So that is a very tough quarter run for Osaka. A lot of these players like to, she's going to probably need to hit the ground running a bit, So it's tricky. It's very tricky. I don't fancy her price at 4, even at she's at 2-1, 9-4 to win that quarter. I mean, if you're going to back Osaka in any shape or form, she's 6-1 to win the tournament. Now with that draw, I don't know if that's value anymore. But if you are going to back Osaka, the mere fact that any time she's reached the semi-final of the Slam, she's went on to win the Slam. I think so. I would say either back the outright or wait until she gets to the semi-final. I think once she gets to the semi-final, I think she's probably the most likely winner, and you still probably will get an odds against price there. So Muguruza now, we're going to look at Muguruza's run. Muguruza, obviously she's got Osaka waiting for her in the third round, but Muguruza has Gasparian, Badosa and Kerber as her worst case scenarios bets. Now Gasparian is a good player who's just been riddled by injury her whole career. She should have nothing. Muguruza is an unbelievable form at the moment. She, like Vondrousova, only won one game against her. She hammered Cannon as well there. So it'll be interesting to see how she gets on against Brady tonight. But she's an unbelievable form, and normally she's the type of person I would never recommend this type of bet with. But I'm just really surprised by the price. She's got Gasparian, who should not be able to handle Muguruza's power. She's got Badosa. Badosa is just out of Badosa or Samsonova. Samsonova is a good player, qualifier. Shouldn't be able to handle Muguruza's power and just her game in general. Badosa is also a player that has been only out of quarantine a couple of days ago, and to be honest with you, even if she wasn't, I wouldn't give her much of a chance against Muguruza. And then Angelique Kerber, maybe. Kerber said she'd been training as hard as she ever did over the Christmas period, or over the winter period, the off season. But then she had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and Kerber wasn't a bit happy about that. She had some wins there at the warm-up event. Was it the Grampians tournament that she had some wins at? but then got fairly comfortably beaten by Sakari. She's not the player that she was. And Muguruza has had the edge over her in recent years in general. So I kind of think that 8-11 with bet365 for Muguruza to get to the fourth round, and that would be probably to play Osaka in that fourth round, is a great bet, because these are players in her form. Now, she has in the past been guilty of just losing to randomers, and you never know. She's not necessarily, unlike someone like Cannon, where I would have faith. You never know, but she's just in such good form. Like in the past, it's like where you just don't know what sort of form she's in, and then all of a sudden she loses in the second round. But now she's in such good form. Once you see her in that good form, you rarely see her make that slip up. So Gasparian, Badosa, Kerber. Worst case scenario, I think Muguruza takes care of all of those. So I'm tipping up. I'm tipping up 3.75 or 2.75 points on Muguruza to win, or to get to the fourth round, 8-11 with bet365. Who is going to win that quarter? I really don't know. I really don't know. It's very hard. It's kind of like you can go with the boring choice and just say, okay, I'll agree with the bookies and say maybe Osaka's a deserved favourite. But I wouldn't be unbelievably confident about it. It's fascinating. Like, the women's game is so fascinating at the moment for me. So many potential players, so many personalities as well that I like. So yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to call. Other than that, Petra's in there. She's about 8-1. You can't really rely on Petra. I just think that Petra. Well, the thing about Petra, if Andreescu has Buzanescu, who has been a giant killer in the past, as Citalina will attest to, Perankova, maybe Venus or Wang, then Petra. That's not an easy run. Andreescu's about 7-2, 4-1 to win the quarter. Sure, how can you back that with so little knowledge of her form? But she says she's been in the press saying that she's in great form. So it's just hard to know. So on Petra, look, Petra lost there recently to Podoroska. I just don't know if I fully have a lot of faith in Petra to maybe be able to beat an Andreescu and then have to beat a Muguruza or Osaka at this stage of her career. I don't know if I buy it. Finally, in the last quarter, this is the quarter with the ever young Serena Williams, just doesn't seem to age. And this is a question I'm going to ask you guys in the podcast listeners. We'll get back to it, okay? So if you just, I'll ask you in a minute. So just look at it, okay? You got Halep in there, you got Sabalenka in there, and you've got Serena Williams, are the three kind of big guns in there. Now, Halep's first round rounds aren't easy at all, okay? But then you've got first round is easy, should be easy enough. But then she's got either Kudermetova or Kostyuk. Rybakina in the third round, or Swiatek, the French Open champion, and then Sabalenka. Yeah, her first two rounds are easy enough, but then the third round will be Kudermetova or Kostyuk, Rybakina or Swiatek, Sabalenka or Serena. And look, I don't know about Halep. Halep is kind of one of those players that I really like her as a person. Her game doesn't. I don't feel that excited watching her play. Like, she covers court amazingly. She's an amazing defender. But like, I'd much prefer to see a Cannon or an Ostapenko, an attacking player like that, or an Osaka or a Muguruza when they're in full flow. Then I do watching Halep. I think maybe a lot of people do feel the same way. But look, she has injury concerns as well at the moment, and I don't know. I just think that's 7-2 for her to beat Kudermetova, who was in good form, wanted a great run to the final in Abu Dhabi. Probably Marta Kostyuk, the young up-and-coming Ukrainian player. Then Rybakina, if Swiatek finds some form, like Swiatek destroyed her on the clay in French Open. I don't see any reason why Swiatek couldn't do the same, in the US Open. Then Sabalenka is the form player, obviously, from Abu Dhabi, and then Serena. Sure, how can you count out Serena? So, look, 7-2 on Halep. I don't like it for those reasons. It's not the easiest draw. A little bit of injury concerns, and she's also one of those players who isn't the most reliable. She is capable of throwing in a stinker every now and then and losing losing to a Xiao Zhang in a first rounder, or a Kanepi, or an Anisimova, or you know what I mean. Like, she is capable of losing to someone who, you know, ranking wise she shouldn't be losing to, you know, that kind of way. So the bet that I love, and this is probably my favourite bet of the whole tournament, is from this quarter, and that is for Serena Williams with Bet365 to get to the fourth round. And these are her fourth round opponents: Siegemund, probably Begu, and then maybe Alison Risks or Potapova. Like, Serena Williams now, like, I know she's touching 40 now, but just look at what she's done. She's ever young. If you think of the last Grand Slams losses she's had, okay, the worst one was losing the Australian Open third round last year to the on fire Qiang Wang, who's a, you know, very dangerous player on her day. But in every other thing, like last year, US Open semi-final Azarenka, right? Then Wimbledon final. Last time there was Wimbledon final, Halep loses to Halep. Last time there's the last US Open final before that, loses the final to Andreescu. The US Open before that, loses the final to Osaka. The Australian Open before that, quarterfinals to Pliskova. There's no sign of this decline that you would be expecting. There's no sign of this. And she has declined. Obviously, she's not just doesn't move around the court as well as she used to, but she's still like playing pretty well, you know, and performing at a really high level, and like still one of the top players in the world. Even this week, you know, she's had great wins over. She beat the likes of Gavrilova. She hammered Pirankova, who was in good form. She beat the red hot Collins on a final set breaker. Like, she's still playing well, and she pulled out of the tournament because she's just resting for the Grand Slam. You know, she still believes she can win this elusive 24th Slam that she's looking for. And for her to beat Siegemund, Begu, and maybe Risk, who's out of form, or Potapova, I couldn't think of an easier. She already has a 2-0. Siegemund's never won a set against her. She has a, you know, like, I just cannot believe at 8-11, you know, I just think it's obvious Serena's going to be there in the quarterfinal, and whether or not she's going to beat the likes of Sabalenka in the fourth round remains to be seen. But we don't have to worry about that. If you were going to ask me who's going to win this quarter, I would put my money on, if I was forced to put money on someone, I'd put it on Serena at 9-2. Or at 7-2, I mean. But I'm not going to put on that bet because there's Sabalenka's in there, and because potentially Halep, it could be a banana skin. But I'd be tempted by that 7-2. But the 8-11 for her to win the first three rounds, 4 points, 4.5 points on Serena to win that, to get to the fourth round. That is my biggest bet of the tournament, and I really, really fancy it. And you can just know by looking at the names. So that's what we're going to go for there. Who's going to win it? Like, Sabalenka obviously is the red hot player. She still has to prove herself. I'd love her to prove herself at slam level, but she still seems to be one of the players that does suffer a little bit from nerves, suffers a little bit from choking in slams. What a matchup that would be between her and Serena. That would be very interesting to see in the fourth round, and hopefully that does actually materialise. But yeah, Serena would be the one I'd go for if I had to. But I will say there's some other tricky players in there. Kudermetova, 33-1. I don't mind that price at all to win that quarter with Skybet. Kostiak, we tipped it up on Paddy Power. I think the price is gone, but Kostiak was 100-1 to win that quarter. And even though I don't think she's going to do it, she is an up-and-coming Ukrainian, very feisty girl, great personality. Great to see someone like her get to the top of the game if she does, because she does have such a great personality. And at 100-1, yeah, absolutely, I'll snap that price up for sure. But having said that, I think Serena's the one that's going to get through the quarter there. So now so that's we've gone through. What about outrights? I've already said I've backed Jennifer Brady 75. I've had some nibbles at the likes of Vondrousova at 200-1 on Betfair. I don't believe in it at all by any means. If the only thing I'll say about outrights is have a look at Andreescu. Just have a look at her in the first round versus Buzarnescu. If you just get to see, even after one set, if she's looking strong after one set, if she's still around that 20-1 mark, just because I think her A game is probably the best A game in the world, I think it's worth putting money on her. She says she's physically perfect. She just needs a little bit of time to get training for this tournament. She obviously has the mentality you need to win a Grand Slam. So at 20-1, I'm going to be very eager to be watching her first round match, and if she's looking like she's in form, that might be the price that I go for Andreescu at 20-1. Might be able to find it on most bookies do on outright in running during the Grand Slam. So just keep an eye out there. That's basically all I've got to say about those prices. We got Barty to win at 6-5. Oh wow, this is good news for me. Nakashima just bet Lasko. I backed Nakashima at 10-1 to beat in a challenger, and he was down a set in a break, and I was like, oh Jesus! And he's in the semi-final. He's 2-5 to win the tournament in the semi-final. He was down a set in the break, and I was like, Jesus! Do you know? It was one of those bets where I'd already cashed. I was already spending the money I won, and then just after that I was like, oh well, I've lost the money now. And now it turns out he's got a chance. He's going to be in the final against, I don't know who's, maybe Gojasic or whatever, or Zapata. Anyway, all you guys who aren't interested in challenger tennis, just ignore that little tangent. But in any case, going back to these bets, Barty to get to the quarterfinal at 6-5 in quarter one, to win that quarter, Shelby Rogers 50-1. So Barty 3 points, Shelby Rogers half a point. Quarter two, no bets in quarter two. Only thing I'll say is Brady is backed at 75-1 to win the tournament. Third quarter, the bet of the third quarter is Muguruza to get to the fourth round, 8-11, 2.75 points units, right? And the fourth quarter, biggest bet of the week, Serena to get to the fourth round, 4.75 points, 8-11. Okay, and of course Kostyuk, a quarter point in Kostyuk at 100-1 to win the quarter with Paddy Power. Okay, that was a mistake by Paddy Power. Should they had her at 6-1 to win the tournament, and then for some reason they have her 100-1 to win the quarter. But anyway, look, we're not complaining. So let's go on to some little match bets there. I'm hopefully not going to go too long with the match bets. I'm already getting pretty tired here, but I do love going through the match bets. And I don't have as much as I've had in the past, if I'm going to be completely honest. So looking through the bets here, there are some big prices, I must say. If I'm going to go through my notes here now, this is where I want to talk to you that I am going to have a few lulls, a few clumsy transitions, and so on. And I've got a bit of a blocked nose as well, so you probably have recognised that too. So we've looked at some of the bets there. Yeah, look at this. All right, I don't have too many match bets there. I'll start off with a kind of a treble, a parlay that I do find is a pretty good parlay. First of all, Ons Jabeur to beat Petkovic, Mertens to beat Fernandez, and the last one is for Felix FAA, and I want him to beat, who's his opponent here again? Felix Auger Aliassime. Let me see where I am, boy. Is he playing Tuesday? Hopefully he is, because he's in the final tonight. Yeah, he's playing Stebe. So, and he is at 1-10. Okay, that price has changed from what I tipped up. So look, we'll have to look again at the other prices here. Yeah, look, it's hard to know. It's kind of hard to know. Have a look at these. Okay, yeah, sorry. So, okay, the bet is basically we have Mertens, and sorry, it's Mertens to beat Danilovic, Mertens to beat Fernandez, and the final bet is Jabeur to beat Petkovic. Look, Pekovic is a veteran, hasn't played much tennis at a high level in 2020. Ons Jabeur is a player that's on the up. She generally speaking, she's an ambitious player. She's so talented, so gifted off both wings. She can do everything. She slice and dice, drop shots. She can unleash the power. Her biggest problem basically is her movement. Okay, she's not the fastest around the court. She's kind of like the female version of Fabio Fognini, only maybe with a few little more slices and dices. She just will have too much talent and too much in her arsenal for Pekovic, who really hasn't performed well at the highest level in the last few years. Mertens is so solid. Fernandez has got maybe a little bit of a reputation for being a good young gun. She is a very talented, good young gun. But who did she lose to, actually, that I just saw? She had a pretty bad loss. I'll go back to it, but basically Mertens is just one of those players, so ultra reliable. You know, if you've paid attention to the podcast, so ultra reliable in these scenarios where she is playing kind of a lower ranked player in the early stages of a Grand Slam. She's made the final here of the I can't remember, is it the Happy Valley? Is that the name of the tournament? I can't remember there, but she's made the final of that. She's in great form. She obviously beat Svitolina and had some good in her most recent match. So she's just going to be too good for Fernandez, in my opinion. And then Danilovic is a bit of a Clare quarter. Did get through. In fairness to her, she did get through her match, her qualifying round, but she got beaten easily enough in straight sets to greet men. And Martic is a step up. Danilovic has never achieved anything at this level on a fast hard court. Martic probably more of a clay quarter herself, but she's just such a reliable, solid match player, and I just expect her to have too much for Danilovic. Danilovic will probably make a few too much unforced errors against someone who doesn't make that many, like Petra Martic. And she's a good problem solver on a court as well, and I just think she'll have too much for Danilovic. That's at an odds against price of a double. So I'm going to suggest 2.5 points on those three at 6-5 on those three players. I just really believe that they're players that, generally speaking, I trust them in this situation. I didn't find that many match bets that I love, but if you're just looking for kind of outsiders, if you're looking for some decent outright bets, there's one that I like. I think I quite like Lauren Davis at 9-4 to beat Bencic. Bencic lost in straight sets there recently to Sorana Cîrstea. She badly needs matches. She's just basically not solid enough, having little streaks of good points, and then just, even longer streaks of just unforced errors and stuff like that. Now, Davis herself isn't exactly the most reliable player in the world, but she is someone who can be a bit of a giant killer at times. She bet Kerber, the Wimbledon champion, or the defending champion in Wimbledon there a couple of years ago. And she remember she had a really amazing match against Halep there. Halep got to the final where it kind of went to something like 11-9, I think, in the third set. Something really impressive. And she also played her first round against Krejcikova, and that went to 3 sets. It went to 3 sets. And Krejcikova actually, I think, got to the semi-final of is it the Grand Prix I'm thinking of? I could be wrong. I'm getting the name of these tournaments wrong. Like, they're all in Melbourne anyway. So, but in any case, which isn't too bad. Like, at the end of the day, she beat Fernandez in the first round last year at the Australian Open. I just think that she's not even that bad a matchup. But Bencic's not even that bad a matchup. I just kind of think that. It's very hard to justify having Bencic at such a hot favourite against somebody who's capable of producing upsets, and just Bencic, can beat herself in this match. She really can beat herself with all her unforced errors. So I think Davis is definitely value at 9-4 to take a chance on her. So that's what I would suggest. 1 point on Lauren Davis to beat Belinda Bencic. Another maybe surprising tip I'm going to give here is for is Alexei Paparan to win a set versus David Goffin is at 8-11. That was 8-11 with Bet365, and yeah, I just think that and also he's 3-1 to win the match. 3-1 to win the match. I think there's definitely value in this. Okay. First of all, last year, like Paparan has had some injury problems, a lot of injury problems, and he's only a young guy. I couldn't believe it when I checked his age there. He's 21. It seems like he's been around for a few years. And sometimes we can tend to get him confused with Kokkinakis, but I think Paparan is a much better talent than Kokkinakis, who's also Australian. But last year, obviously beat Tsonga, got to the third round, pushed Berrettini to 4 sets at the US Open. Like he's won a match at the French. He's beat Carreño Busta at Wimbledon. And he's lost in last Wimbledon, and he lost in 4 against Medvedev. No disgrace whatsoever. He reached the third round 2 years ago on the Australian Open as well. I think I remember him. He was beating Team quite well in the second round, and then Team had to retire. But then the next match went to 5 sets against Lucas Pouille, and he lost that one. But that might not seem great. But Lucas Pouille got to the semi-final that year. Lucas Pouille was in really good form. So this Paparan kid, he can really, really play. And I was reading up on him there, on an interview with him, and he's like saying, "I've never been as well prepared pre-season before this one. I've had a brilliant pre-season. He's really positive vibes. He played last week. He got a few wins last week, and I think he lost in a final set. I think he bet Gojo, and I can't remember who the other player was, and then he lost in a final set breaker to Dimitrov, which is no disgrace. Goffin is obviously a class act. He had a good run in the early part of the year in Antalya. Lost to Deminar, I think it was in the final or the semi-final, I can't remember, but he had a bad loss there recently to Alcaraz in the warm-up event. Maybe he's just saving himself at the Australian Open. Very bad loss kind of to Sinner at the French, and it generally feels like he would get to the third or fourth round, but I just feel like he's not quite the same player in the last few years. I think he's coming towards the latter part of his career. He's a player that's game is built on intensity and speed and cardio and just incredible hitting. He's a brilliant ball striker, but I just think he's a little bit more vulnerable these days. And like last year went 5 sets with her, 5 sets against her, but lost in 4 to Rublev. Obviously lost in straight sets to Sinner at the Australian Open. I think Paparan at 8-11, 2.75 points to win a set, and I'm going to also put a point on him to win the match. I think Goffin is there for the taking. Of course, if Goffin ends up winning, no one is going to be ultimately surprised. But I think Paparan can make this match very, very competitive. So that's what I'm thinking of there. I think if you get a price now, Bet365, I couldn't wait any longer for the French Open for put out the podcast. So there are definitely going to be some odds out there, or some bets out there that or some markets out there that haven't been put up yet. But I just didn't want to wait for all those markets and then have my preview only up on YouTube a few hours before the tournament starts. I want to get it out early this weekend. I want to get it out on this Saturday. So basically there is a market that Bet365 sometimes do, and it's between the Kukushkin and Dominic Thiem match. Now Dominic Thiem can be notorious enough for slow start. In the past certainly was notorious for starting off slow matches. Obviously in the US Open, Jan Munar I think got a few breaks against him in the first set. Obviously Sock and Silic got a few breaks against him I think in the French Open this year. Sock certainly did. And if you can get something like he's 1-66 to beat Kukushkin, so if you can get Kukushkin is a very solid player. Like last year, I think he bet Garin at the US Open last year. He bet Fabio at the French. He lost in 5 to Pullmans last year in the Australian Open. Now Pullmans is one of the better young Australian players. But look at the US Open in 2019, he beat Batista Gut. He also has beaten in 2019. He beat the likes of Isner and Struff in Wimbledon. Like, this guy is a very good player, and he's always been a pretty solid Grand Slam match performer. And Team obviously lost early to Berrettini easily at the ATP Cup, but I wouldn't read too much into it. He got hammered by Krajinovic before the US Open, and he won the tournament. Then he went on to win the tournament. But it can be a slow enough start, and I think even if he's not, first of all, I think Kukushkin, if you can get him at, I think Kukushkin is going to cover the handicap, whether it's 7 or 8.5 games. I think he'll cover it. I think he'll definitely think maybe the overs in the match handicap might be the best one, because it could definitely bring one of these sets to 7-5 or 7-6. So I think maybe the overs is the way to go. That could be like 28.5 games. I definitely would put 1.25 points on that. I don't like putting on too much big money on overs. But definitely also, if you get a price on Kukushkin to break serve, because Kukushkin's not an amazing server himself, he is a very good returner. I think Kukushkin, if you get a price on Kukushkin, sometimes it could be 0.5 games. If you even to break serve once, you might even get a price like 8 to 11. I definitely would take that, 2.75 points, if you can get that sort of price on him to break serve. So yeah, I do think Kukushkin is going to make that match pretty reasonably competitive, and I think he certainly has a break of serve in him if you can get a price in that. But those prices haven't come up yet, so just keep an eye out on them. Let me see who else. Seppi is my boy. Last year tipped him up to beat Kecmanovic at 2-1 he was, and he won in straight sets. As I don't want to keep mentioning it, you're going to say, oh, will you stop boasting about that? Okay, that's a year ago. Stop coasting off that success, and you're dead right. You're absolutely dead right. So I'll just take a bit. Seppi, 36, he's nearly 37. He's on the way out. He's definitely on the way out, and his best days are over, but he's always had a great record in Australia. He's always played well in Australia. He's been to the fourth round of Australia a few times. Obviously, there was one year he bet Rogers. There's another year he bet Kyrgios in a classic match. So he loves the fast hard courts of Australia. Zverev he's a clay courter, and he's another guy that's kind of in the twilight of his career. He's also had to do a full 2-week lockdown, so it's hard to know how he lasts for a 5-set match. I know a lot of the players know Victor Troitsky said, how am I going to be able to do a 5-set match? Haven't had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and maybe this will become a factor in the 5-set matches. But Seppi leads the head-to-head 2-1. The last time they played, 2015, it was in hard court. He won that one in straight sets. I just think that Seppi, this could be my farewell Andreas Seppi bet in the Grand Slam. He's one of these players that has given me so much money over the year. I've made so much money off over the years. Back in these kind of early rounds in Grand Slam matches, especially off the clay. And look, if he doesn't win this match, I think that's it. I think that's me saying, okay, Andreas, you're not there anymore. Your game is gone, and I think I'm going to let you go unless I see evidence of some miraculous improvement. But as it stands, I think there's enough good reasons to back him against Zverev. He's got a much better record in Australian Open. And then Zverev. Pablo Cuevas, sorry, I think you say Cuevas is how you say it. Obviously, he's beaten the likes of the year before in Australia. Beat Kecmanovic last year. Went 5 sets with Stan, who was playing very well. This was the Stan who actually beat Medvedev last year. This is just last year. He's beat Johnson and Thompson the year before. Good wins. Stevie Johnson, not a decent Grand Slam player, lost in 5 sets to TFO. That was the year that TFO also got to the quarterfinals. He's even this year he lost in 4 sets to TFO, 3-1 in the US Open. That's not no disgrace. Zverev lost to Simone last year in the Australian Open. He lost to Socrates in the US Open before. Look, Zverev hasn't really done an awful lot on hard court. And while Seppi, it's hard to tell, is he finally, he played a match there recently where he lost to Caruso in 2 tight sets, in fairness. And Caruso is actually no mug, even on hard courts, and Cuevas had an easy win against Andujar and Hasse, but I wouldn't read much into that, and he lost the straight test to Hurkacz. I just think over 5 sets, Seppi's record is Australian Open. I don't see enough reason to think that Seppi's gone. That basically that we should really be considering a Cuevas a favourite against Seppi in the Australian Open. I know he's not the player quite the player he was, but I still think that we haven't evidence of such a stark decline that we should be making Cuevas a favourite against him. I don't see that evidence, and I think all in all, I think Seppi should be the slight favourite for me. So I'm going to back him at the underprice of evens with just 2 points. Just 2 points. Andrea Seppi. If you lose, fair enough. Andreas, I'm not going to complain because you give me so many. You've been so good to me over the years, but I have a feeling you're gonna come true for me one more time and come true for us if you follow that bet, guys. Let me think. I did kind of back Samsonova. I'm not even sure at 7-4 to win in straight sets against Badosa, just on the basis that the Badosa's just only had 2 days after 2 weeks quarantine to prepare. Hard to know. I'm not even going to tip that one up. Villela, I think I quite like Villela at a big underdog price against Mashak. He's an underdog price against Mashak, the young Czech player. He's going to be a really top player, Mashak. There's no doubt about it. But Villela is kind of one of those under the radar players there. I think. Now, where did I make my notes for this? I might have to do this one by memory, but Villela, they both came through qualifying at the Australian Open, okay? And Villela beat that young Asian kid, I can't remember, who was quite highly rated in the third round. And I think Mashak had a reasonably easy draw. I think Torpegard was the hardest player he played, and he did hammer him, but he didn't really have to play anyone too hard. And also, Mashak had a poor enough loss to Duckworth in the. Was it the river? What's it called? The Murray River Open. I think that's the one this week. So, and I saw some of that match, and he just didn't look that bright. He did actually have to quarantine for the 2 weeks first. Now, I do think he's going to be a really good player, Mashak. But at 9-4 last year, Villela, I think at the US Open, did he take? Or he qualified for the Australian Open last year, and he took catching after 4 sets, you know. And at this stage, I don't think we have seen enough of Mashak to be justified in him being such a big favourite in a Grand Slam match against Villela. I just kind of see that as kind of maybe Mashak a slight favourite, but not enough for to justify kind of a price of like 2-7. So. At Villela at 5-2, I think is definitely worth a point in my opinion, and it could be one of those ones where you could be covering if it gets to a 5th set. I do expect it to be fairly competitive, that match. So yeah, I'm going to go with Villela at 5-2 there. I'm surprised that Stilic is 6-4 against Dimitrov. He leads the head-to-head 4-2. The last match was on clay that Dimitrov won in 5 sets, and that clay would not be one of Silic's best surfaces, and it's not one of Dimitrov's either. I think that was only a couple of years ago. But Silic just I'd say he seems to be a person I just think that he does have a bit of a matchup edge there over Dimitrov. I think the backhand, he's got a massive edge in the backhand exchanges. And I don't know if Silic has definitely declined since 2018 when he was reaching Grand Slam finals, but I don't think if we have the evidence to show that he's declined so much. He actually has done well at the Grand Slams last year. He beat Bautista Agut in the Grand Slam. He reached the 4th round of the Australian Open last year, beat Bautista Agut in pair when pair was playing well in the Australian Open. In the US Open, he was the only person to take a set off Thiem before Thiem got to the final. So like it's and I can't remember who we lost to in the French Open, but the clay isn't that relevant. Dimitrov got to the 4th round of the US Open, but he didn't really have got to the 4th round of the French. This year, but he had very poor opponents to beat. Barrera, Martin, Buena was exhausted after beating Shapovalov. Then he got badly beaten by Tsitsipas. He lost in 5 sets the US Open to Fucsovic. No disgrace, but then again, it's no surprise either. He lost in 5 sets to Tommy Paul last year. Lost in 5 to Moutet at Wimbledon the year before. Like he's had an awful lot of early round losses, and the Moutet easily, he did beat Papiran in a 5 set in 3 sets. The final set breaker this week, but then lost easily to Moutet. But that's this week. I just think that it should be about 50-50. I don't think we have any reason. Silic, he went 3 sets with Shardy, who got to the semi-final. That doesn't seem such bad form. I think Silic these days primes themselves for the slams, and I just kind of like the 6-4 on Cilic. So I'm not going to go massive on it, but I'm just going to go point Marin Cilic 6-4, 1 point to beat Grigor Dimitrov. Is there anybody else? I'm thinking. I'm taking Millman at 4-6. Could be worth 1.5 point. Nothing crazy. I just think Millman. We know what he's like in Australia. Like he plays, obviously was only a few points away from beating Roger Federer last year in the Australian Open. Like I think he didn't he beat Hugo Humbert last year as well in the Australian Open. He had some really big wins. Like the year before, he went 5 sets with Batista Gut when Batista Gut was in great form. Like I think Millman is a different beast in Australia over 5 sets, and Moutet had a good run there this week and lost easily to Felix in the semi-final. Was it? I can't remember the names of the tournaments at this stage. I think it was either the Murray River Open or the whatever. But I think Millman should be a bigger favourite there, so I'm going to go 1.5 points on Millman to win that one. I'm going to have my faith in him there. Of course, Nishikori was 11-4 to beat Carreño Busta. Nishikori, I might not be able to resist that bet. Sevastova 5-2 to beat Kanepi. I know Kanepi's just gone on a long run to the final. I think was it hers that she's in the Happy Valley? I don't know. But Sevastova at 5-2 is still a bit big. I think Sevastova is still capable of playing some good tennis. So that seems like a bit of a big price against Kanepi, who's also capable of throwing in the odd stinker. Who else? I do quite like Sonogo against Querrey on the basis that just a little bit more solid. He's a player on the up. Got to the fourth round of the French Open this year. And just Querrey is just so flaky. You just never know what Querrey you're going to get. So if you are going to choose someone, like if you were life dependent on it, you'd have to go with Sonogo. I think he's more solid, and he's just a player that he's on the rise. While Querrey, even though Querrey probably has bigger weapons, it's just much harder to trust. And I'm just he'd be the one I'd be leaning there on for. Although I haven't officially tipped it up yet. Let's have a look at the other bets very, very shortly. I'm going to wrap it up pretty shortly here, folks. Bedene Bublik, I reckon that match will be an overs match. That could well go over the 39s, but we won't say anything about that yet. I expect Schwartzman to beat Elias Weimer very, very easily. I think he'll probably cover the 8.5 handicap on that. So just go for a 1.25 bet on at 4-5 on Schwartzman, because he's just everything he does, everything that Weimer does, he does a bit better. Okay, and I think might be the same story with Batista Gut against Albot. Similar players, just Albot has nothing that he can hurt Batista Gut with. Batista Gut should be able to cover the handicap there. Let me think. Duckworth. I think if Duckworth gets to 4-6, I might be backing him against who's he playing again? Zoomer. Shapovalov Sinner. It feels like that match has got over 40 games. That's going to be an over 40 games written all over it. We'll have to wait and see. I won't put any bets on that just yet. I think Tiafoe will beat Travaglia, even though Travaglia has been playing great tennis this week. Is there any other big underdogs? Yes, as I said, Nishikori might not be able to resist backing him. I do think Berrettini will beat Anderson, and I'm surprised to see that he's as short as he is, even though Anderson has shown a little bit of form. Any other bets there? Fucsovic Pullmans might be one for the maybe back Pullmans to get 1 or 2 breaks there. Might be over 1 break. I think Pullmans has a break or 2 in him there in that match, and Fucsovic loves break and serve as well, so that could be one for over breaks. I don't see a market on it yet. Let me see, we're running down through it. Sangren is quite a big price to beat Demonauer. I wouldn't be putting Demonauer in any accumulators or any parlays, put it that way, yeah. And let me see. There was another match there. Nishioka and Martinez, I expect to have lots of breaks. There's a match there I thought was going to have loads of breaks, and I can't find it now. I'll get back to you on that. Okay. Now, as far as the women goes, we're nearly done. Yeah, Sevastova 5-2, still a very big price there. Xiao Zhang definitely. I'm definitely curious about Xiao Zhang against Anne Lee at a price of 13-8. I think that could be value. I'll go back to you about that. Sabalenka should cover the handicap. I think Sabalenka will hammer Kuzmova. So if you want to bet under 17.5 games, I wouldn't rule that out. I wouldn't discourage you from doing that actually. Let me see. Collins should be Bogdan, but its price is about right. Yeah, this is Brady, Ostapenko 11-8. Now Muchkova seems to be carrying an injury, so that even makes the Ostapenko price more, because Ostapenko played some good stuff against. I know she's still having her serving issues, but I quite like that price against Muchkova. Laura Siegemund, Fernandez, Cabrera. Yeah, I'm kind of looking through these bets here, and I think Kimberly Burrell, she bet Vekic there a few years ago. She's a young Australian player. Seems a bit big at 10-3 to beat Rebecca Marino, who's playing her first Grand Slam in donkey's years. Gavrilova, I'm quite tempted by her against Cerebris Tormo, although I haven't pulled the trigger just yet. I think the Putin-Seva Sloane Stephens match. Sloane Stephens 5-2, unbelievable. But she's just a mess at the moment, and it's a sad state of affairs to see. I won't be doing any tipping her for any for any outrights as I have done in the past. So apart from that, really and truly, they are my only major bets that I'm going to be giving you guys for the moment. But I will pay attention to my Twitter handle at Mug Podcast on Twitter, a Mugs Game Podcast on Twitter, and also please subscribe to our YouTube channel and make comments on the YouTube channel. Share the which is called a Mugs Game Podcast. Share the podcast with your friends, your WhatsApp groups, and all that kind of thing, and make comments. And the question I want to ask you guys is this, okay? Why, this is not non-betting related why is it that, relatively speaking, the top players like Nadal, Djokovic, Federer and Serena, why is it that they don't, in their older age, they don't seem to be suffering the same level of decline as their peers of the same age? I mean, even look at Serena's sister Venus. Look how Venus has declined so dramatically since 2017, 2018. Like, we haven't seen that with Serena, even though she's had a child and everything. We look at Federer's peers, all these guys like Eugenie, Kohlschreiber, Gilles Simon. Like, some of them are still on the tour, but they're just journeymen now. Like, they're not at all competitive. They're not particularly competitive anymore. And yeah, it's the same thing like we saw with when Nadal is 34, Djokovic's going to be 34 soon. Like, it's and we've seen it with the likes of most of these guys, Baghdadis, the list goes on and on. David Ferrer came, was pre-33 was a top 10 player, and then just within the space of 2 years just kind of was like a journeyman out there. I know a lot of these cases are injury cases as well, but I think like the rule seems to be that most of these players, that even if they stay relatively competitive, they're nowhere near their prime, and yet the big three and Serena have been able to stave off this demise. And I just want to know why do you think that is, guys? Is it to do with motivation? Or am I getting it wrong? Maybe they have declined to the same extent as the other players. It's just that their talent edge is so big that they're still able to stay on top. That could be it. Is it training? Have they got access to better medicine, better physio, better medical technology? I don't know, secrets. Could it be something else? I know other people might be quite cynical and say it could be something to do with doping. I'm not going to go down that route, but I want to open up that debate for you guys, because I think that's, to me, is a very interesting question. So I really do want to open up that debate for you outside of tennis. Regarding who do I think is going to win the tournaments, I think myself, I think it's going to be a Dominic Thiem, Danny Medvedev final, and I think Medvedev is going to win the final. So I'm going against the big favourite Djokovic. If Djokovic wins it, wow, what a player. Like, he'll have proved me wrong, but I just feel like he's not quite at the same level that he was. He's not like a god mode like he was a couple of years ago in the final. Haven't seen that god mode from Djokovic. I've seen Djokovic play really tough match tennis. Yes, he's still mentally very strong, but I haven't seen the god mode level of Djokovic in a very long time. I think Medvedev is just so mentally strong. I think Thiem is probably shot for shot the best player in the world, but I just think Medvedev is just mentally so strong, and that's. I think if it came down to a fifth set, I think he'd eventually wear down someone like a Thiem with his court coverage, like he did at the ATP Tour Finals. So. He also Medvedev and Zverev wants to look out for in the aces, because in the aces market when that comes out, because I expect both of them to go far. There's no Isner in the tournament. Raonic isn't in great form. Like Opelka's not in great form. Most of the big servers are not there. So I think really realistically it's going to be, because I expect them to go far, it's going to be Zverev and Medvedev who are going to be fighting out for the most aces market. So yes, I'm going to go Medvedev. And in the women's, I really don't know. I think it's going to come from the bottom half. God. I'm going to say Osaka will beat Cannon in the final. I really have no idea. Maybe I haven't a clue. That's why it's so interesting. So yeah, that's it, guys. So remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave a comment if you want, and share it with your friends. Enjoy the tennis, enjoy the bets. Please bet responsibly. That's one thing I've done for said on the podcast so far. And yeah, look, we'll chat to you soon.